The millionaire takes his mistress to his company party. The pregnant wife arrives with the board of directors. Set the stage for the untold story of a relationship steeped in luxury and lies. The air in the grand ballroom, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and ambition, crackled with unspoken rules. At the center of this glittering universe was Damien Valor, a man who didn't just break rules, he rewrote them. Tonight, he paraded his latest revision, a young, dazzling intern named Chloe Vance on his arm, a public monument to his own audacity. He believed his pregnant wife, Dr. Anya Sterling, was safely at home, a forgotten chapter in his ascension. But Anya was about to remind him and everyone else that the sharpest minds are often the most underestimated. She didn't come to cry. She came to collect. Part 1. The Stage of Audacity. The Apex Innovation Annual Gala was less a party and more a coronation. It was a testament to the meteoric rise of its founder and CEO, Damien Valor. This year, the event was held inside the soaring metallic curves of the New York Public Library's Astor Hall, a venue as bold and unapologetic as Damien himself. Hundreds of guests, a curated collection of Midtown's tech titans, venture capitalists, and the city's political elite, moved through the space like glittering fish in a deep-sea aquarium. Light from the towering chandeliers glinted off diamond necklaces and the polished faces of Patek Philippe. Watches. Champagne, a vintage that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent, flowed from fountains, and the air buzzed with the low rhythm of power. Damien Valor was at the epicenter of it all. At 38, he was a deity in a tailored Tom Ford suit. His charm was his sharpest weapon, a disarming smile that could precede both a multi-million-dollar deal and a crushing termination. He was a man who had everything: a 9-figure net worth, a sprawling mansion in the Hamptons with a view that stretched to the ocean, and a portfolio of accolades that painted him as a visionary. He also had a wife, Dr. Anya Sterling, a woman whose quiet brilliance was the antithesis of his explosive charisma. Anya was not present. The official story whispered among the senior VPs and their impeccably dressed spouses was that her pregnancy, a difficult one, now in its 8th month, required absolute bed rest. It was a plausible, even sympathetic reason. They imagined her in her palace, serene and supportive, a domestic goddess nurturing the Valor heir. This image was a fiction that Damien had carefully cultivated. The truth was, Anya had not been invited. Their marriage, once a partnership of intellect and ambition, had soured into a cold war fought in the silent, cavernous rooms of their shared home. Damien saw her pregnancy not as a joy, but as an anchor. Her body, once a source of desire, had become a vessel, and her sharp mind, which he had once admired, now felt like a threat. He had begun treating her like a beautiful antique doll, to be placed on a shelf, admired from a distance, but never used. He had begun to believe she was fragile, breakable. He had forgotten she was forged in steel. Anya, a Stanford-educated doctor of behavioral economics, had long since traded the fast-paced world of academic research and consulting for a quieter life, a choice she had made to support Damien's dream. She saw patterns in human behavior that others missed, the subtle tells in a negotiation, the flicker of an eyelid that betrayed a lie. For years, she had been Damien's secret weapon, his invisible strategist. But as Apex Innovation grew, Damien's ego had grown with it, eclipsing his need for her counsel. He no longer saw her as a partner, but as an accessory, and lately, a cumbersome one. The distance between them had become a chasm, and into that chasm had fallen Chloe Vance. Chloe was 23, an intern from the marketing department, with eyes the color of a summer sky and an ambition that burned with the heat of a supernova. She was a mirror reflecting Damien's own youth, his own hunger. She looked at him with the undiluted adoration he now craved, an adoration Anya's gaze could no longer offer. For Damien, Chloe was not just a woman. She was a validation. She was proof that he was still the young, virile disruptor, not a man nearing 40, tethered to the mundane reality of impending fatherhood. Tonight was to be Chloe's unofficial debut. Bringing her to the gala was a monumental risk, a blatant transgression against the unspoken rules of their world. But Damien's success had been built on such risks. He thrived on the adrenaline of the gamble, the thrill of getting away with it. He was convinced his power was a shield that rendered him immune to consequence. He had convinced himself that Anya, secluded and pregnant, was powerless to stop him. It was his most critical, and would soon be his most catastrophic miscalculation. From his vantage point near the sculpted bar, Damien scanned the room, a king inspecting his court. He held 2 champagne flutes. He was waiting for Chloe, who was refreshing herself. He felt a familiar surge of invincibility. Everyone here either relied on him, feared him, or wanted to be him. All were orbiting his star, and tonight he was going to give them a new constellation to gaze upon. He was about to show them all that the universe bent to his will, and his will alone. Chloe Vance emerged from the ladies' room, a vision in crimson silk. The dress was a daring choice, a slash of color against the more muted blacks, silvers, and navy blues of the room. It clung to her slender figure, a stark, deliberate contrast to the maternal shape of the woman she was replacing. She had the tight, unwrinkled beauty of youth, a beauty that felt potent and perishable. Her smile, as she navigated the crowd of powerful figures, was a carefully calibrated mix of awe and entitlement. She was playing a part, and she was playing it with everything she had. Damien's eyes locked onto her, and his characteristic smile spread across his face. He met her halfway, handing her a glass of champagne. "There you are," he murmured, his voice a low drawl that was only for her, but loud enough for those nearby to catch. "I was starting to think you'd abandoned me." "Never, Damien," she replied, her voice a breathless whisper. She touched his arm, a gesture of familiarity that sent a ripple of shock through the senior staff members who witnessed it. This was Chloe Vance, the intern, the one who fetched coffee and compiled press clippings, and she was touching the CEO's arm as if she had every right to. Damien savored the silent, wide-eyed reactions. This was the point. He led Chloe on a slow, deliberate tour of the room, a predator showing off his prized catch. He didn't introduce her as his mistress, of course. The lie was more insidious, wrapped in the language of corporate mentorship. "Everyone, I want you to meet Chloe Vance," Damien announced to a circle of stunned-looking executives. "Chloe is one of our brightest young talents in the marketing division, a true rising star. I've taken her under my wing. It's crucial we nurture the next generation of innovators at Apex. The executives, men and women, twice Chloe's age, with mortgages, children in private schools, and careers tied to Damien's goodwill, simply nodded. They smiled stiff, unnatural smiles. They saw the way Damien's hand rested on the small of Chloe's back, the possessive gleam in his eyes, the flush on her cheeks that wasn't entirely from the champagne. They understood exactly what kind of nurturing was taking place. They were complicit in their silence, their survival instincts overriding any sense of moral outrage. A few feet away, Eleanor Vance, the sharp-minded, sharper-tongued head legal, watched the spectacle with a look of undisguised contempt. She had known Damien for a decade, drafted the ironclad contracts that built his empire, and had also been invited to his wedding to Anya. She considered Anya a friend, or as close to a friend as her reserved nature would allow. She caught the eye of Michael Chen, the CFO, a man who looked perpetually worried, and rightly so. Michael's expression was a mix of horror and frantic calculation. An open scandal of this magnitude could spook investors and shave points off their stock price. "He's lost his mind," Eleanor muttered under her breath, taking a large swallow of her gin martini. "This is beyond reckless," Michael whispered. "This is corporate suicide. What is he thinking?" "He's not thinking," Eleanor corrected. "He's feeling, and right now he feels untouchable." Damien, oblivious, or perhaps simply indifferent to their disapproval, continued his parade. He introduced Chloe to a powerful city councilwoman, a tech blogger with millions of followers, and a visiting venture capitalist from Singapore. With each introduction, he grew bolder, his compliments for Chloe more effusive, his physical proximity to her more intimate. He was high on the sheer audacity of it all. He was writing a new narrative in real time, one in which he was the master of his own destiny, unburdened by convention or the wife he had left behind in his sterile, silent mansion. Chloe, for her part, was swept away by the whirlwind. This was a world she had only dreamed of. Men whose names she had only read in Forbes shook her hand, listening to her opinions, or at least pretending to. She was standing next to the sun, and its heat was intoxicating. If there was a price to pay for this moment, she couldn't see it. The glare was too bright. She mistook Damien's recklessness for power, his arrogance for confidence. She believed she was about to have it all, the zenith of the night, and the nadir of Damien's judgment came when he tapped a knife against his glass, calling for silence. The hum of conversation slowly died down as all eyes turned to him. Chloe stood beside him, her hand now linked with his. "Friends, colleagues, partners," Damien began, his voice resonating with practiced charisma. "Thank you for joining me tonight to celebrate another year of unprecedented success for Apex Innovation. We've broken records, defied expectations, and solidified our place as leaders in the industry. But success isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about people. It's about fostering talent and believing in potential." His gaze moved to Chloe, a fond, almost paternal smile on his lips that fooled absolutely no one. "It's about finding those rare individuals who have the fire, the drive, the vision to change the world, and it's about giving them the platform to shine." He raised his glass. "So I want to propose a toast, not just to our past achievements, but to the future, to new ideas, to bold moves, and to the brilliant stars of tomorrow." He squeezed Chloe's hand. "To the future, to the future." The crowd dutifully echoed, a confused chorus of admiration, envy, and disgust. The toast was a thinly veiled homage to his own infidelity, a public anointing of his mistress. It was the ultimate act of hubris, a declaration of war against his marriage, pronounced in front of his entire professional world. He took a triumphant sip of his champagne, the taste of victory on his tongue. It was at that precise moment of supreme self-satisfaction that the great double doors at the hall's entrance, which had been closed since the festivities began, silently swung open. The shift in the room's atmosphere was instant and absolute. It began not with a sound, but with a collective intake of breath, a subtle but palpable change in pressure. The party murmur didn't just quiet, it vanished, sucked away into a sudden, massive vacuum of silence. Every head in the ballroom, from the junior associates near the door to Damien Valor himself on the makeshift stage, turned in unison. Framed in the grand doorway, silhouetted against the ambient light, was a figure. It took a moment for the crowd's eyes to adjust to process the impossible sight. It was Dr. Anya Sterling. She was not the frail, bedridden woman of Damien's convenient narrative. She was a portrait of majestic composure. She wore a bespoke gown of emerald green velvet, a color that spoke of wealth and authority. The fabric was expertly tailored to accommodate her 8-month pregnancy, cloaking her belly not as a sign of vulnerability, but as one of regal, maternal power. Her dark hair was pulled back into an elegant bun, revealing the clean, intelligent lines of her face. Her expression was serene, her eyes calm and clear as they swept over the stunned assembly. She did not look like a scorned wife. She looked like a queen who had arrived to hold court. The shock of her presence alone would have been enough to shatter the night's golden facade. But Anya was not alone. To her right stood Marcus Alva, the chairman of the Apex Innovation Board, a formidable man in his 60s with a silver mane of hair and a gaze that could wither a hostile takeover bid at 50 paces. Marcus was the embodiment of old money and corporate gravitas. He was rarely seen at company social functions, preferring the quiet sanctity of the boardroom. His presence here now was an anomaly of seismic proportions. He stood beside Anya with a protective stillness, his hand hovering near her elbow, not as an escort, but as a sentinel. To her left stood the rest of the board of directors. There was Eleanor Vance, the sharp-minded ex-CEO of a competing tech giant, whom Damien had painstakingly courted to join his board. There was General Olms, a retired 4-star general whose expertise in logistics was legendary. And there was Kenji Tanaka, the stoic head of a Japanese investment firm that held a significant stake in Apex. They were not smiling. They were not dressed for a party. They were dressed for a reckoning. Their faces were a uniform mask of grim, unassailable seriousness. The picture was devastating in its implication. This was not a wife ruining a party. This was a strategic maneuver executed with chilling precision. This was a flanking attack. Damien froze on the stage, his hand still holding Chloe's. The color drained from his face, replaced by a deathly pallor. His triumphant smile had collapsed into a gaping rictus of disbelief. In one silent moment, his entire world had tilted on its axis. The power, the control, the illusion of invincibility. It all evaporated beneath the calm, steady gaze of his pregnant wife. He looked from Anya to Marcus Alva, and a cold, primal fear, an emotion he hadn't felt in years, began to snake its way up his spine. Chloe, the so-called star of the future, seemed to shrink. The vibrant red of her dress now looked garish, cheap. The adoration in her eyes was replaced by growing, frightened confusion. She was no longer the center of attention. She was a piece of collateral damage in a war she didn't even know was being fought. Her hand slid from Damien's, slick with sweat. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. The only sound was the faint ambient music from the lobby, a stark contrast to the funereal quiet inside the ballroom. Then Anya took a single, deliberate step forward. The soft click of her heel on the polished floor resonated like a gavel. She began to walk, not with the waddle of late pregnancy, but with the measured, unhurried grace of someone in absolute control. Marcus Alva and the board of directors moved with her, a phalanx of power carving a path through the sea of petrified guests. They parted before her, like the Red Sea before Moses. The VPs, the city councilwoman, the tech blogger. All cringed, looking away, suddenly desperate not to be associated with the man on the stage. Anya did not look at them. Her gaze was fixed like a laser on one person, and one person only, her husband. She was not there to confront the mistress. The mistress was a symptom, a footnote. Anya was there for the source of the disease. As she drew closer to the stage, the narrative of the night was violently rewritten. The story was no longer about Damien's audacity. It was about Anya's arrival, and everyone in the room knew with a certainty that chilled them to the bone that this was not an ending. It was the beginning of the fall. Part 2. The treachery of blood and the secret of fortune. The walk from the grand entrance to the foot of the stage felt to Damien like the agonizing last mile of a marathon he didn't know he was running. The air, once filled with his own booming voice, was now so thin he could barely breathe. Anya stopped right in front of him. Her head tilted slightly as she looked up. The stage gave him a few feet of physical height, but he had never felt smaller, more exposed. He finally found his voice, a strained, croaking sound that was a pathetic imitation of his usual confident tone. "Anya, what is this, Wamos? What are you doing here? You're supposed to be resting." He looked desperately toward Marcus Alva, searching for an ally, a familiar anchor in this surreal nightmare. "Marcus, what does this mean? You're scaring the guests." Marcus Alva's stony expression did not soften. Instead, he took a step forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Anya, a human shield of immense authority. He completely ignored Damien's question. His voice, when he spoke, was not the collegial tone of a chairman addressing his CEO, but something much colder, much more personal. "Are you all right, my dear?" he asked, with eyes full of genuine concern, directed only at Anya. Anya nodded slightly, reassuring him. "I am perfectly fine, Uncle Marcus. Thank you for asking." A collective, muffled gasp spread among the onlookers who were close enough to hear. Uncle Marcus. The revelation landed in the room like a second shockwave. Damien's mind reeled. He had known Anya had a godfather, a mysterious Uncle Marcus she spoke of fondly, but rarely. A retired financier, she had said. Someone who managed her family's modest trust. He had met the man once, years ago, a brief, forgettable handshake at a family gathering. Never in a million years had he made the connection between that discreet figure from Anya's past and the formidable Marcus Alva, the titan of industry he had worked so hard to impress. The man who held the fate of his company in his hands. The board members had known, of course. They had always known. The knowledge cast their grim expressions in a new light. This was not just a corporate action. It was a personal matter. They weren't just backing a plan. They were backing a family member. Marcus turned his glacial gaze back to Damien. The thin veneer of civility was gone. "Valor," he said, the name dropping like a chunk of ice. "You appear to have a number of misconceptions. The first is that you have a say in where my goddaughter chooses to be. The second, and far more critical, is that the comfort of your invited guest is our primary concern tonight." He gestured disapprovingly at the stunned crowd. "The party is over. On behalf of the Board of Directors of Apex Innovation, I ask all non-essential personnel to vacate the premises immediately. Thank you for your service. Your cars are waiting." There was a moment of astonishment and hesitation, then a frantic, hurried exodus. No one needed to be told twice. It was a slow-motion stampede, a desperate rush to the exits. The clatter of dropped glasses and the whisper of expensive fabrics filled the air as the city's elite fled the scene of the corporate execution. They did not want to be part of the shrapnel that was about to fly. In 3 minutes, the cavernous ballroom was nearly empty. All that remained were Damien and Chloe, trapped on the stage, and the silent, imposing tribunal standing before them. Anya, her hand now resting possessively on her swollen belly, and the entire board of directors of Apex Innovation. The glittering decorations and the half-empty champagne glasses suddenly looked pathetic, the remnants of a party that had died a violent death. Damien's fear was being rapidly replaced by a hot, defensive rage. The audacity. To be ambushed like this, humiliated in his own temple of success. "This is insane," he finally spat, his voice trembling with fury. "You can't do this. This is my company, my party." He turned to Anya, his face contorted into a mask of self-justifying rage. "And you? You orchestrate this. This circus after everything I've given you. I told you to stay home." Anya's composure held flawless. She looked at him not with the pain of a betrayed wife, but with the distant pity of a doctor observing a patient in the throes of terminal delusion. "You seem to be confused, Damien," Anya said, her voice quiet and even, but with a pure, unadulterated steel edge. "You didn't give me anything. We were supposed to be partners, and you are wrong about where home is. My home is where my family's interests reside." She gently stroked her stomach. "And my home is with the legacy my father entrusted to Uncle Marcus to protect. A legacy that, it turns out, includes a 12% founding stake in Apex Innovation, held in a blind trust under my name. A fact you never bothered to investigate." Damien stared at her, his mouth opening and closing in silence. 12%. That made her the second largest individual shareholder, after him. He had always assumed her family money was old, dusty, and irrelevant. He had never imagined it was woven into the very fabric of his own success. He finally flicked his frightened gaze to Chloe, as if seeing her for the first time. She was no longer a symbol of his power, but a living, breathing testament to his monumental stupidity. Anya followed his gaze, dismissing Chloe with a flick of her eyes. "My dear Damien, this is what you were willing to risk everything for. A child playing dress-up. You not only underestimated me, you underestimated the entirety of your own life." Her words hung in the air, sharp and precise, dissecting his arrogance with surgical skill. Chloe, for her part, was caught between two crushing forces. Her hand slid from Damien's, slick with sweat. She was a pawn in a game whose rules she was only beginning to grasp. She opened her mouth to speak, then snapped it shut, tears welling in her eyes. She grabbed the sides of her crimson dress, turned, and fled, her heels clicking a frantic, desperate rhythm on the marble floor until she disappeared through a side exit, a fleeting phantom of Damien's colossal miscalculation. He didn't even watch her go. His attention was focused solely on Anya. "So that's what this is about," he sneered, trying to regain some control, to reframe the narrative. "Money. This is extortion. You realize you have some leverage and decide to mount this elaborate coup for what? A bigger settlement in the divorce?" A faint, pitying smile touched Anya's lips. "Divorce. Oh, Damien, you're still thinking 3 moves behind. A divorce is a negotiation between equals. You and I are no longer equals." It was then that Marcus Alva spoke again, his voice a low murmur of authority. "Valor, I suggest you stop talking. You are compounding your already catastrophic position." He looked at Anya, a silent question in his eyes. She gave him a subtle nod. It was time. "You see, Damien," Anya continued. Her tone shifted from personal confrontation to something colder, more clinical. "Your affair, your public humiliation of me, that was merely the catalyst. It was the insult that made me finally decide to look at the injury. It hurt, yes, but mostly it insulted me that you thought I was so stupid that I wouldn't notice." She began to walk slowly across the front of the stage. Her movements were deliberate, her voice steady. "I started with the small things, the extravagant client gifts that never showed up on any official expense report, the sudden, inexplicable need for a holding company in the Cayman Islands. You always told me I didn't understand the complexities of your business, but I understand patterns, and I understand behavior, and your behavior, Damien, became erratic, desperate." Damien's face went rigid. This was moving beyond marital treachery into far more dangerous territory. I didn't need to hire a private investigator to find out about Chloe, Anya said, waving a dismissive hand. A girl like that leaves a digital breadcrumb trail a mile wide. No, I reserved my resources for something more important. I hired a team of forensic accountants, the best in the business, men and women who can find a single misplaced comma in a mountain of financial data. She stopped walking and looked directly at him. Her eyes, which he had once found so beautiful, now looked like the barrels of a gun. What I found, Damien, wasn't just infidelity. It was a grand symphony of fraud. General Ohms, the logistics expert on the board, cleared his throat. Valor, we have the preliminary report. It is extensive. Eleanor Vance, the sharp-eyed board member, added with her crisp, no-nonsense tone. Project Nightingale. Does that name ring a bell? Damien froze. His blood ran cold. Project Nightingale was his secret, his albatross, his Hail Mary. A disastrously over-budget, perpetually failing biotech side venture, he had been siphoning millions from Apex Innovation to keep afloat, convinced it would be his true legacy. It was a financial black hole, and he had been propping it up illegally for 18 months. He thought his tracks were perfectly covered. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. But the lie was thin, transparent. The sweat beading on his forehead told the real story. Anya shook her head slowly. No more lies, Damien. It's over. We know everything. We know about the shell corporations. We know about the falsified invoices. We know about the supplier kickbacks. We know you leveraged Apex assets to secure personal loans for a failing venture you illegally concealed from your own board and shareholders. She paused, letting the weight of the accusation settle in the dead air of the room. You didn't bring your mistress to your company party to celebrate your success, Damien. You brought her here tonight because you were about to flee. The final wire transfer for Project Nightingale was scheduled for tomorrow morning. You were going to drain the last accessible capital, fly to a country with no extradition treaty, and leave the smoking crater of Apex Innovation for the rest of us to deal with. Her voice dropped to a whisper, laced with a contempt that was more devastating than any scream. You weren't celebrating a new future. You were celebrating your escape, but you couldn't resist one last arrogant flourish, could you? You had to rub my nose in it, and that, Damien, she concluded, her eyes locking with his, was your fatal mistake. The name Project Nightingale hung in the air, an invisible toxic cloud. For Damien, it was the sound of his own death knell. The blood drained from his face, leaving a sickly gray sheen under the harsh lights of the ballroom. He looked at Anya, not as his wife, but as a prosecutor who had just presented irrefutable evidence to close the case. The intricate web of lies he had spent years weaving had just been shredded in a single, devastating moment. How? The word was a choked whisper, a gasp for air in a collapsing reality. How could you possibly know? Anya's expression remained one of cool detachment, the look of a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. You seem to forget, Damien, that before I was your wife, I was an economist specializing in behavioral modeling. I build predictive models based on patterns of human irrationality, and your defining characteristic, your fatal flaw, has always been your monumental ego. I simply built a model based on that. She gestured toward the impassive face of Michael Chen, the CFO, who had walked back into the room and now stood near the board, his face a mask of grim resolve. Michael and I have been talking for weeks. Damien's head snapped toward his CFO, a man he had always considered loyal, if timid. Michael, you betrayed me. Michael Chen straightened his tie, his hands trembling slightly, but his voice, for the first time in Damien's memory, was firm. I have a fiduciary duty to this company and its shareholders. Mr. Valor, My duty is not to you personally, especially not when your personal actions threaten to destroy everything we've built. Dr. Solano approached me with some irregularities she had flagged. I was skeptical at first, but the patterns were undeniable. The numbers did not lie. Anya picked up the narrative, her voice relentless. You thought Michael was just a numbers man, an accountant. You underestimated him, just as you underestimated me. You assumed his fear of you was greater than his integrity. But when faced with the evidence of systematic, large-scale embezzlement, Michael made the right choice. Marcus Alva stepped forward again, his presence dominating the space. He pulled a thin, leather-bound folder from inside his jacket. He did not open it. The gesture alone was sufficient. The forensic accounting report is damning, Damien, Marcus stated, his voice devoid of emotion. We have digital copies of transfers between Apex accounts and the Shell Corporation's funding Project Nightingale. We have sworn affidavits from 2 suppliers you strong-armed into the kickback scheme. They were more than happy to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Eleanor Vance, the sharp-eyed board member, added her piece. And we have Chloe Vance. Damien stared, confused. Chloe? She knows nothing about my business. Oh, she knows more than you think, Eleanor said, with an ironic, joyless smile. Or rather, she has more than you think. Young, ambitious women who get involved with married, powerful men often have an insurance policy. In this case, it was a cloud backup of every text and email you ever sent her. Damien's mind raced, frantically trying to recall the details of his digital correspondence. The arrogant boasts, the casual mentions of a game-changing secret project that would make them royalty, the complaints about the board holding him back. It was all circumstantial, surely. That's nothing, he blustered, a cornered animal showing its teeth. Meaningless chatter. It proves nothing. The definitive proof, Anya corrected him calmly, Damien, was something you gave her yourself. A small gift. Do you recall? She paused, letting him writhe in the silence. A few weeks ago, you gave her a brand new, top-of-the-line laptop, a gift to your protégé to help with her work. What you didn't know is that our IT department, under Mr. Chen's instruction, had already flagged you as an internal security risk. Every new device connected to the Apex network, especially one handed to a junior intern for no discernible reason, is subject to a security sweep. On that laptop, Michael Chen added, his voice gaining strength, we found a hidden, partitioned drive. On that drive was a single folder. Project Nightingale. The complete business plan, the fraudulent funding prospectus, the real catastrophic burn rate, and most importantly, your escape strategy, complete with details of a new identity and a one-way flight itinerary to Belize, booked for tomorrow afternoon. Anya finished for him. It was a checkmate so complete, so total, that Damien could do nothing but stare into the abyss that had just opened beneath him. He had been outmaneuvered in every single respect. His arrogance had been the key to his own imprisonment. He had handed his executioners the axe, sharpened it for them, and then pointed to the spot on his own neck. The final, crushing piece came not from Anya or the board, but from a source he had long forgotten. Kenji Tanaka, the silent Japanese investor, spoke for the first time, his English precise and accented. Mr. Valor, he said, bowing slightly, but keeping his eyes fixed on Damien. My firm invested in Apex Innovation because of the technology, but also because of the leadership. We were led to believe the leadership was a partnership between you and your wife, Dr. Sterling. Her family's historical involvement was a sign of stability. Your actions have not only been criminal, they have been a profound dishonor to that partnership. My firm, and the investors I represent, have lost all faith in your ability to lead. He looked at Anya. However, we have gained immense respect for Dr. Sterling's diligence and integrity. We will support the board's decision. The united front was absolute. There was no crack in their armor, no dissenting voice he could appeal to, no angle left to play. He had been so focused on the superficial battle with his wife, so engrossed in the thrill of his affair, that he had missed the real war being fought in the shadows, a war for the soul of his company, a war he had already lost. The weight of their collective judgment pressed down on Damien, a physical force that seemed to buckle his knees. The tailored suit that had felt like armor now felt like a shroud. He looked at the faces before him. Anya, serene and resolute. Marcus, the embodiment of righteous authority. The board, a jury that had already rendered its verdict. In their eyes, he saw no pity, no room for negotiation. He saw only the cold, hard finality of consequence. His mind, which had always raced at lightning speed, formulating strategies and contingency plans, was now a vortex of white noise. Belize, the flight, the new life he had planned a world away from the complexities of Apex and the impending reality of fatherhood. He had been so close, a tangible dream. Now it was just smoke dissipating in the harsh glare of this makeshift tribunal. So what now? Damien finally asked the question, suspended in the cavernous room. It was a plea, a desperate question from a king who had just been shown the guillotine. You call the SEC, the police, drag the company's name, your own name, he added, looking at Anya. Through the mud. Is that what you want? It was a pathetic last-ditch attempt to find leverage, to suggest that his destruction would be mutual. Marcus Alva answered, his tone leaving no doubt. There will be no public spectacle, Damien, if it can be avoided. The reputation of Apex Innovation is paramount. We have a responsibility to our employees and our legitimate investors. A public scandal of this magnitude would be devastating to them. He took a single step forward, raising a hand to preempt the flash of hope in Damien's eyes. Do not mistake our discretion for weakness. Your options tonight are limited to two. Both end with your complete and permanent removal from this company. He gestured to Eleanor Vance, the head legal, who had been standing silently, her expression unreadable. She stepped forward, placing a thin folder and a pen on the edge of the stage. Option 1, Marcus continued, is the hard way. I make one phone call. In 10 minutes, detectives from the White Collar Crimes Division will walk through that door. You will be arrested. You will stand trial for embezzlement, securities fraud, and a half-dozen other felonies. You will likely spend the next decade or more in federal prison. Apex will issue a statement, denounce your actions, and fully cooperate with the prosecution. The company will survive, but it will be wounded. Your name will be synonymous with disgrace. Damien winced. The word prison was a physical blow. Option 2, Marcus said, lowering his voice, is the clean way. Inside that folder is your full, immediate resignation as CEO and chairman of the board. It also contains a document transferring the entirety of your shareholding in Apex Innovation, 28% of it, to the trust controlled by Anya as restitution for the funds you embezzled. You sign it. Tonight. Now. My shares, Damien choked out. That's everything. That's worth hundreds of millions. It's a fraction of what you were prepared to steal and a pittance for the damage you have caused. Evelyn Duran cut in sharply. Consider yourself offered a deal. If you sign, Marcus continued, you will be allowed to walk out that door. We will issue a statement tomorrow morning announcing your immediate retirement for personal health reasons. We will handle the fallout from Project Nightingale internally. No authorities will be called. You will walk away with nothing from this company, but you will have your freedom." Damien looked from the folder to Anya. Her face was calm, but her eyes held a flicker of something he couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't hatred. It was a deep, almost weary finality. This was her justice. Not vengeance, but a rebalancing of the scales. She wasn't just taking his company. She was recovering her life, her security, her child's future, all of which he had gambled away. He knew there was no choice. A life of diminished status and wealth versus a life behind bars. His ego screamed in protest, but his survival instinct, the one true God he had always worshipped, took over. Slowly, tremulously, he knelt on the stage. His $1,000 wool-clad knees met the floor. It was the posture of a king surrendering. He reached out for the pen. His hand was shaking so violently he could barely grasp it. He uncapped it and opened the folder. The legal language swam before his eyes, but he knew what it said. It was the abdication of his entire world. With a trembling hand, he scrawled his signature, the signature that had launched a multi-billion-dollar company, on the line at the bottom. Then he did the same on the share transfer document. It was done. In 2 strokes of a pen, he had gone from titan to pariah. He pushed the folder away from him as if it were radioactive. He stood up, his movements stiff, robotic. He was a ghost in his own ballroom. "It's done," he said, his voice hollow. Marcus Alva nodded curtly. "Eleanor, if you would secure the documents." Eleanor picked up the folder with the tips of her fingers. "Damien," Marcus said, using his first name for the last time. "You have 60 seconds to vacate the premises. Your security detail has been dismissed. Your corporate accounts have been frozen. A taxi has been called for you. Do not return to the house. Any personal effects will be sent to an address of your choosing. Do not contact Dr. Sterling or any employee of this company again. Are we clear?" Damien gave a single, jerky nod. He looked one last time at Anya, his wife, the mother of his child, the architect of his ruin. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. What was there to say? He had sown the wind and was now reaping the whirlwind. He turned and walked off the stage, not toward the grand entrance, but toward the side exit Chloe had used. He did not look back. The solitary figure of the fallen CEO disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind the empire he had built and the woman he had fatally underestimated. As the door closed behind him, Anya finally let out a long, slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She put a hand on her abdomen, a gesture of protection and promise. The room was silent. The battle was over. The future was hers to write. In the quiet aftermath, standing in the wreckage of her husband's empire, Anya Sterling was not a victim seeking solace, but a leader inspecting her new domain. The board, her silent partners in this audacious maneuver, voted unanimously to install her as the interim CEO of Apex Innovation. She was no longer the woman behind the man. She was the power, clear and undisputed. Her pregnancy was not an obstacle, but a deadline, a motivator to clean up the company and build a stable, honorable legacy for the child she carried. Damien Valor faded into self-imposed exile, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms about the dangers of hubris and underestimating the quiet ones. Anya, backed by the strength of her family and her own formidable intellect, not only survived the betrayal, she prospered in it, transforming the ashes of a broken marriage into the foundation of a new dynasty, proving that the best revenge is not anger, but ascension. Conclusion and final call to action. Thank you for joining us for this story of twisted drama and justice. If you were on the edge of your seat watching this millionaire's world collapse, don't forget to hit the like button. What did you think of Anya's masterful plan? Let us know in the comments below. For more stories of intricate plots, shocking betrayals, and satisfying vengeance, be sure to click subscribe and tap the notification bell. You won't want to miss the next story we have for you. Share this video with someone who loves a good drama, and we'll see you in the next one.